Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Dr. John Hlophe has been nominated by Parliament to be a member of the Judicial Service Commission. So the roadmap for this particular episode is going to look at who is Dr. John Hlophe, what is the Judicial Service Commission, what controversies have occurred on the Judicial Service Commission, what is the new controversy around this appointment, and my reflections and thoughts on all of this. But I think to start off, it's important to recognize that the selection of judges is very important. And as far as possible, this selection has to be beyond reproach. We want to have in any nation a judiciary that is credible, that is competent, and whose judgments will not always be hyper-scrutinized by the public because of their political affiliations or anything to that effect. If you look at what has been happening in America right now, there has been a division of the public on the basis of decisions that have been made by the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court right now is ideologically divided, and people are concerned about what that means for rule of law and credibility of the institution of the judiciary. Some examples: the recent judgments to basically overturn Roe v. Wade, which was the abortion case, by the U.S. Supreme Court has changed abortion legislation in many states because it was a legally protected right, and now states have a decision where they can either allow for abortions or ban abortions. And this is a result of the decision of the Supreme Court. They've actually increased gun owner rights in some of their decisions. And just recently, they have granted a president a lot of immunity for actions which are committed in an official capacity. And that has created division and tension in America. The judges who have been appointed, you can track their political ideology based on who appointed them. For instance, 3 Democratic judges on the Supreme Court were appointed by Democrats, right? And then there are 3 conservative judges who were appointed by Republicans. And as a result of that, you're almost able to predict how these judges are going to rule based on the president who appointed them. And this is not ideal, and it's not something that is desirable in a legal system. Having said that about America, it is my view that some judges already in South Africa have started playing the game of politics. They take media interviews, they speak on issues that are beyond the judicial code. They're not supposed to be speaking on those things. And one person who's done that on some instances has been Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Also, it is my view that Chief Justice Raymond Zondo played the game in order to get that appointment to be Chief Justice. Why do I say this? I think that he was overly familiar when President Ramaphosa gave testimony at the Zondo Commission. He was sometimes helping him answer questions. He was laughing and joking around with him in a manner that was unbecoming of a person who was there to oversee an investigation into allegations of state capture, right? Number 2, I think that certain allegations of state capture which were raised around Bosasa giving money to Andile Ramaphosa were overlooked by the judge in his report. Also, the allegations that were made around Glencore were overlooked. Glencore was accused of trying to raise the price of coal in South Africa in a way that was corrupt, in a way that did not meet any business fundamentals, and in a way that typically would have been considered state capture. These allegations were made by Brian Molefe, and because it was Brian Molefe, they were never investigated. However, Glencore then paid admission of guilt in the United Kingdom for billions. They paid admission of guilt in the USA for billions, which is basically indicative that this is a company that prima facie we can conclude was committing corrupt activities everywhere that it was operating. Where did they pay these? What were the admission of guilt fines for? Bribing African politicians and also manipulation of commodity prices. So I think by ignoring those things, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was not oblivious to them. I think that he was strategically trying to make it such that he would be a preferential option for the president, who basically appoints the Chief Justice. And he got the job. He also didn't release the Zondo report, the State Capture Commission report, in full until he got the appointment. You know, that thing was dropping in part 1, part 2, part 3. It was like a Game of Thrones series in the manner that it was being dropped. And when it came out, it did not implicate the president himself. And there seemed to me a clear conflict of interest in the way that was operated, because one of the witnesses is actually responsible for appointing you in a job that you have aspirations to have. And number 2, your report doesn't deal with all of the issues that were traversed in your own hearing. That to me seems as if a political game has been played. There are many people who have made remarks about, political moves by judges, by certain individuals on the bench, some of whom have used these NGOs to make noise for them when they don't get appointed to where they want to go. All of this is part of politics. And I don't think that there's only one judge who has ever been drunk in South Africa. I don't think that there's only one judge who has ever performed some form of misconduct. But a lot of these things are overlooked within the community because those people are on the right side of the ideology, of the elite structure and all of that. And I think that's something that everyone must be aware of, right? Of course, it's not as, I think, bad as America in that you can see these ideological differences across the board. But I think we would be naive to assume that this doesn't happen already in South Africa. Now, let's go to the issue of Dr. John Hlophe. Who is Dr. John Hlophe? Right. Dr. Mandlakaise John Hlophe is 65 years of age. He is the former judge president of the Western Cape Division of the High Court, where he served for 24 years. His qualifications are that he holds a bachelor, a B Juris from the University of Fort Hare, an LLB from the University of Natal, a LLM from the University of Cambridge, and a PhD in law from the University of Cambridge. He also has honorary degrees in law. The previous judicial positions that he served in, he was the judge of the Western Cape Division of the High Court in 1995. He was the acting deputy judge president of the Cape of Good Hope Provincial Division in 1998. He was a member of the Industrial Court of South Africa and Transkei. Previous positions held before he became a judge. He was a fellow at the Legal Resources Center in 1984. He was a senior lecturer at the University of Zululand in 1985. He was a Roman law tutor at the University of Cambridge in 1987. He was a lecturer at the University of Natal in 1988 to 1990. Between 1991 and 1994, he was the vice dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Transkei. He was a part-time lecturer in Public Law 1 and Public Law 2 at the Transkei Technikon between 1993 and 1994. He was a lecturer in industrial relations at Damlin Management School at the Umtata branch in 1993 and 1994. And he was a professor and head of Department of Constitutional and Public International Law at the University of Transkei, which is now known as Walter Sisulu University, in 1994. So this is a person who has extensive academic experience and one could say has displayed the highest levels of academic brilliance in law, a PhD from Cambridge University. Cambridge University is consistently, for the last 50 years or whatever the number may be, one of the top 10 universities in the world. It is as Ivy League as Ivy League gets, right? It is the slay queen of academia, if you will. There's a few big institutions, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale. Those are the big ones. And as you can see, Dr. John Hlophe, he has a PhD, but he doesn't have a PhD from Tavern University of of Zingi. He has a PhD from Cambridge. That is significant. However, he is a controversial figure because in April 2021, the Judicial Conduct Tribunal found him guilty of gross misconduct. This decision was then confirmed by the Judicial Service Commission, which recommended that Parliament impeach and remove him from the bench as per Section 177 of the Constitution. In March of 2024, he was impeached by Parliament, becoming the first judge to be impeached. Predominantly, the members of Parliament who voted for this were members of the ANC and the DA. About 300 people voted, 100 people did not vote for this particular, and that's basically the composition of the last administration. And then in June of 2024, he then became a member of Parliament for the MK party. He did an undertaker. Wavuka lo muntu. He woke up. Undertaker. Then he was now in Parliament as the leader of opposition and as the leader of the MK party in Parliament. And in July of 2024, he then got nominated by Parliament to be a member of the JSC. JSC. What is the JSC? Let me tell you, because not everyone watching this has got an understanding of law or the legal community or even how judges are elected. You're in luck. I went to law school at Wits University, so I can break this down for you. In South Africa, the Judicial Service Commission plays an important role in the appointment and dismissal of judges. Just so you get an idea, the President, Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal are appointed by the President together with other members of the Cabinet after consulting with the Judicial Service Commission, and all other judges are appointed by the President on the advice of the Judicial Service Commission. The Judicial Service Commission consists of 3 representatives of the judiciary: the Chief Justice, the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and a Judge President designated by the Judge's President, right? 1 member of the executive, who is the Minister of Justice. 4 legal practitioners nominated by the professions and appointed by the President. There are typically 2 advocates and there are 2 attorneys. 6 members of the National Assembly, at least 3 of whom must be members of opposition parties. So this is where Dr. John Hlophe comes in, you see, 3 of whom must be members of opposition parties. And the official opposition, the largest opposition, because now DA is a member of this grand coalition. They nominate as a party the person that they want to send. They chose to send Dr. John Hlophe. You see the ndabas. That's where the ndaba comes from. Ndaba is issue for those who don't speak Zulu. Right. There are 4 members of the National Council of Provinces who are supported by a vote of 4 provinces. There's 1 law teacher who is designated by the law teachers of the University of Law faculties. And there are 4 persons designated by the President together with members of the Cabinet after consulting all of the members of the parties in the National Assembly. Right? Now, the criteria for someone to be credible, to be selected to be a judge, is that all judicial officers must be appropriately qualified and must be fit and proper persons. This is a legal concept, fit and proper. But just to explain it in accessible, terminology, if you will, in order to be fit and proper, a person must show integrity, reliability, and honesty, as these are the characteristics which could affect the relationship between, a lawyer and a client, a lawyer and the public. And if you want to become a judge, obviously you have to be a lawyer, and then you have to be fit and proper. And that is what fit and proper means. So when you hear people say this thing, fit and proper, they are talking about this. You can't have a criminal record and all other things. It's a very long list, but if just to give you an overview of what it's about that, right? Now, if you want some more details about the JSC, right? The Judicial Service Commission is established in terms of Section 178 of the Constitution. It consists in total of 23 members. Right? And in terms of Section 178(5) of the Constitution, the JSC is entitled to advise the national government on any matters relating to the judiciary and or the administration of justice. Right? Let me see what else I can say to you about the JSC. Right. That's basically it. Now, what are the prior controversies recent controversies which have come up in the JSC, which has made people very sensitive around who gets to be in the JSC? At some point, members of the JSC included Advocate Dalimpofu, as well as Julius Malema. And there was drama, especially in 2022, when the interviews for the position of Chief Justice were happening. On the third day, this is day 3, when the JSC interviewed Gauteng Judge President Dustin Mlambo, there was drama. There were complaints about this because in the first instance, the Commissioner, Advocate Griffiths Madonsela, was asking very aggressive questions. And Judges Matter, this NGO that basically says they exist to protect judges, but they really care about some judges, not all. Right? So Judges Matter viewed his questioning as being that which is trafficking wild conspiracy theories and not really testing the candidate's fitness to be Chief Justice. Now, Advocate Dalimpofu, he really asked some controversial questions because there were allegations of harassment of women, which pertained to President Dustin Mlambo. And, when Dalimpofu was asking the question, he called them whispers. There were a few articles that were written about it, but nothing was corroborated. However, he did ask about that. And there were people who thought those questions were unfair. Then there were some heated exchanges between Ronald Lamola, Minister of Justice, and Julius Malema. And Ronald Lamola actually interrupted Julius Malema and called him a liar. And then Julius, I think, called him a small boy. And it was just a lot of drama. It was a lot of drama. And Julius Malema said Ronald Lamola was trying to undermine him, etc., etc. So there's tension there that comes back from youth league days, if you will, right? So there was a lot of controversy there in general because people were trying to lobby hard. Some organizations seemed to prefer Dustin Mlambo as the Chief Justice. In fact, Raymond Zondo wasn't really Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. He wasn't the first option of the JSC, to be quite honest with you. He was really able to get that position because he had positioned himself strategically to really benefit. But he was not the nominated candidate from the JSC, right? He was still chosen by the president, but the JSC did not nominate him. So there were some controversies here, and this led to all manner of dispute and drama, which brings us to where we are now, right? We are now at the point where people are saying, listen, we cannot have somebody who has been found to be unethical in their conduct, to not be fit and proper to be a judge, to go to this panel which evaluates individuals to ascertain whether they are credible, competent, fit and proper to occupy this very, very grave and important position, which is known as a judge. It is a thing that comes with weight, gravitas. Gravitas. It's a nice word, gravitas. That's what being a judge entails. You have gravitas. You have a disposition of being fair, of being balanced, of being honest. How can somebody who has been found to have been dishonest occupy that position? This is the criticism. And these are some of the comments that were being made in Parliament today around this. Just watch a variety of responses. There were different views. And when we come back, I'll give you my thoughts on whether or not, it's okay to allow him to go into that particular position. Let's hear what the members of Parliament themselves said.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House designates the following members to the Judicial Service Commission in terms of Section 178, subsection 1H of the Constitution of the Republic of 1996. A is Mr. M.S. Likhanyane of the African National Congress. B is Ms. F. Hassan of the ANC. C is Advocate G. Bredenbach of the DA. D is Dr. M.J. Hlophe of MK. E is Mr. J.S. Malema of EFF. F is Mr. R.A.P. Trollip of Action SA. So I move.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? I've noted the DA.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The DA objects, and we wish to do a declaration in terms of Rule 108.
An objection having been noted and request for declaration requested, I will now ask the parties in the following order to make their declarations. The DA, the time for declaration, honorable members, is 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we expect to receive a lot of criticism when it comes to the vote because of our decision to force a vote on this matter, given the long-standing practice that when a position is allocated to a party for representation on other forums, it is taken as the prerogative of that party.
Excuse me, order, honorable members, I'm sorry. The time for your declaration, as it has been agreed to before in the Rules Committee, DA is 5 minutes.
Continue.
5 minutes, you can continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given the long-standing practice that when a position is allocated to a party for representation on other forums, it is taken as the prerogative of that party to decide who will represent the National Assembly. We also expect the argument to be made that for as long as an individual is deemed to be fit and proper to serve the National Assembly, you are consequently fit and proper to represent the National Assembly on other forums. However, in the current context, there are 2 reasons why this process should not continue today. The first is that it is a matter of public record that Dr. Hlophe lost the status as a judge of the High Court of South Africa as a consequence of a finding of gross misconduct by the Judicial Services Commission. The decision to be taken today is furthermore not merely a political decision, but the exercise of a public power aimed at contributing to the establishment of the very same Judicial Services Commission. In the circumstances, it's a legal requirement of the National Assembly to act in a reasonable and rational manner. We are strongly of the view that it is neither reasonable nor rational to elect Dr. Hlophe as a representative of the National Assembly on the Judicial Services Commission. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hlophe is to be found on the grounds I've just mentioned, if you listened, Honourable Member. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hlophe is to be found in the constitutional obligation which we as members of the National Assembly enjoy to assist and protect the judiciary in order to ensure its independence, its impartiality, its dignity, and its effectiveness. Madam Speaker, even if the majority today holds the view that any person who is fit and proper to be a member of Parliament is fit and proper to be a member of the JSC, it must follow that a large number of applicants to be interviewed by the Judicial Services Commission going forward will object and apply for the recusal of Dr. Hlophe on the basis the finding of gross misconduct renders him unfit to serve on a body that is determined to fitness, that is to determine the fitness and the propriety of others. Madam Speaker, this poses the risk of paralyzing the JSC and tying it up in endless review processes. If we are to assist and support the judiciary, Madam Speaker, we must today refrain from exposing the Judicial Services Commission to this risk. The DA cannot vote to put Dr. John Hlophe on the JSC. Thank you.
Order, honorable members. The MK party, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The provisions of Section 1781 of the Constitution 1996 set out the composition of the Judicial Services Commission, JSE. Apart from the Chief Justice, the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, the JSC, also consists of 6 persons designated by the National Assembly from among its members, at least 3 of whom must be members of opposition parties represented in the Assembly in terms of Section 1781H of the Constitution. The Constitution does not contain an inherent qualification requirement for members to sit on the JSC. Since members who qualify to be appointed to the JSC are already members of Parliament and therefore bound by their oath of office, the Constitution in its wisdom does not regulate the qualification of members to sit in the JSC. The existing Constitution scholarship on the makeup of the JSC endorses the appointment of politicians to the JSC. According to Professor Pierre DeVos, judges are not elected. The involvement of politicians in the JSC provides a semblance of credibility to the JSC process, especially because politicians are deemed to enjoy the mandate of the electorate. The further point to be made relates to the powers of the judiciary, which include invalidating legislation and adjudicating serious matters of national public importance. Importantly, politicians are involved in the JSC so that they amplify the voice of the poor, the electorate. Therefore, the legal qualification and judicial experience of members such as Dr. Hlophe are a shoe fit for a body such as the JSC. It is also important to highlight that the numerical and proportional strength of parties such as the MKP and the resultant privileges accruing from that are constitutionally protected. The attempt to erode the will of the people by dictating to the MKP which of its preferred candidates are to be designated to the JSC is constitutionally repulsive. More importantly, the rules of the National Assembly do not prescribe the minimum requirement for the delegation or appointment of members to any of its forums such as the JSE. The MKP has done huge justice to the House to bring into the lawmaking house a Cambridge graduate, PhD graduate with law, a Cambridge graduate, PhD graduate from Cambridge with law degree to come into the House and assist the House to make the laws of this country. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. EFF, 4 minutes.
No, thank you very much, Speaker of the National Assembly. We, as the economic freedom fighters, fully support the appointment of Dr. John Hlophe as a representative of South Africa's 7th Parliament in the Judicial Services Commission. As a matter of principle, is that anyone who is eligible to become a member of Parliament as per Section 47 of the Constitution can be delegated to whatever responsibility that all members of Parliament are eligible for. And that is the principle that we had sustained. There are so many less than capable members of the Democratic Alliance, some of which are serving in the executive now, who do not have any form of qualification or direction. We have not yet exposed their incapacity because they're eligible to be appointed even as executives. Some of them are even deputized by people who are more qualified than them. It's just a group of white illiterates, semi-illiterates that are presiding over government because a certain section of society has given you that responsibility. We respect that. So let's respect the fact that a certain number of people in South Africa have voted for Mkhonto as a party and have designated Dr. Hlophe to become a member of parliament. So let's respect that. It's a matter of protocol, which we have always protected in the Chief Whips Forum, that whoever is designated by a political party must be respected. So we wish you well, Dr. Hlophe, in the Judicial Services Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The IFP. Order, honorable members. The IFP.
Honorable Speaker, the Judicial Services Commission plays a key role in the appointment of judges as per the constitutional mandate. It is incumbent upon the members of parliament appointed to the JSC to always be guided by the principle of fairness, integrity, and above all, a commitment to the rule of law. Elected members of parliament choosing to represent us on this prestigious body bear a profound responsibility. They are not merely representatives of their respective parties, but are ambassadors of this parliament, and by extension, the people of South Africa. Their actions, decisions, and demeanor within the Judicial Service Commission must transcend individual or party political ambitions. They must embody the collective will and aspirations of our diverse society. This emphasis on the rule of law as their guiding principle is not just a matter of ethical importance, but of national significance. The integrity of our judiciary, its independence, and its ability to function without fear, favor, or prejudice is contingent upon our appointees holding these values as the core of their service. May this House reaffirm its pledge to uphold the sanctity of our judiciary by ensuring our representatives on the Judicial Service Commission act not as members of their political parties, but as guardians of our Constitution and as stewards of justice and the rule of South Africans. I thank you.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, there are just 2 or 3 issues that we want to raise on this matter. The first one is that it's correct that in a Chief Whips Forum, we've agreed to work within certain parameters. We've established certain principles. One of those principles is that parties must be permitted to second their own chosen members to specific portfolio committees. That's one of the principles that we've established. It doesn't mean that there would not be a time where we deviate from that if there's a concern emanating from one of the parties who are represented in the WIPAR. The second issue is that we respect the fact that the DA raises a concern and an objection on the issue of Honorable Hlophe for the reasons that they are advancing, which are, of course, on the basis of the argument as presented by the Chief Whip of the Democratic Alliance. But our own view as the ANC, which is a view that has been consistent in all the committees we have said, the Chief Whips Forum, as well as in the Rules Committee, we have agreed that in instances where the rules of Parliament or the Constitution has not clearly defined a particular position, we are going to have to live on the basis of the established rules and practices of Parliament. And I want to make an example about this matter, which is still a very contentious issue in the Rules Committee that we are discussing. The parties, for instance, have been engaging one another about what we understand as members of the 7th Parliament as the Chief Whip of the majority versus the Chief Whip of the largest party. And we've agreed that until rules are amended, otherwise, we're going to have to stay with the current convention and the rules of the National Assembly. Our view as the ANC is that notwithstanding the concern that has been raised by the DA on the Hlophe matter, we want to suggest that the House should not take a position unless it has clarified its own rules where there's a lacuna or there's a gap on our rules, as well as the Constitution, so that when we take a position, it does not just become a political position, but is a position that is supported by either the Constitution or the rules of the National Assembly. So that is the point that we want to raise, Honorable Speaker, as the African National Congress.
Now, here are my thoughts and reflections on Dr. John Hlophe and everything that has been said. Number one, there's an interesting debate here around legal positivism and ethics. Legal positivism is basically following the rule as it is written. So a lot of members of parliament basically said, listen, he is duly elected to be a member of parliament. He qualifies for all of the privileges, all obligations, duties, and as a member of parliament. And as a result of that, he should actually be allowed to do that. Criticisms of legal positivism have always been that you fail to apply ethical considerations when you strictly adhere to a rule, even when you can clearly see that there are ethical considerations. So our judiciary has tended to be an activist judiciary because there's a recognition that there were certain laws under apartheid which, while they were on the paper as laws, were unfair, unjust, and morally abhorrent. So that contestation between legal positivism and ethics is always one that is interesting to observe and clearly here exists, right? On the other hand, while that is a real thing, we must also recognize that the MK party is a duly elected political party representing the interests of 2.3 million South Africans. It is the leading opposition party, not the leading opposition in a technical sense, but it is the official opposition because we know that DA had 22%, MK had 15%, right? So, but DA is in the Grand Coalition. So it is the official opposition. And as such, everyone should be very, very, very careful around trying to reduce the privileges that exist for one political party. It's when that political party has earned those privileges. Because we often talk about defending democracy. We often talk about defending the Constitution. It would be unconstitutional and a depreciation of democratic values to block somebody who has all of the entitlements by virtue of their office from being able to access another place where they have an access card to get into. There's a very, very dangerous precedent that some people are entertaining when they say Dr. John Hlophe should not be able to go there. So the principle, the ethical principle on one side is a person who has been deemed unfit to be a judge should not sit in a judicial capacity over future judges. The other principle is we have to uphold the democracy and the Constitution and respect the letter of that Constitution. Remember how the Democratic Alliance has been talking about how people who want to change the Constitution are attacking the Constitution. So if you say you want to change the rules to prevent somebody right now who is legally entitled because you don't like that somebody, is that not an attack of the Constitution? I think we need to be very cautious in this approach. Second thing I want to say is that I think that the finding of gross misconduct, I respect it, but I think it was too harsh. I think there was misconduct, but I think gross misconduct is a strict category that I don't think was met here. Simply because Dr. John Hlophe went and said to other judges, they must think about how they move in the Zuma matter. I don't think really was such a thing that disqualified him from being a judge forever. I think that this was vindictive. I think it was a reflection of a retaliation and also a very hyper anti-Zuma sentiment which has existed in the media and certain elite spaces, which I think is unhealthy. Part of the reason why America is going through troubles now is because they vilified and demonized the Trump supporters to the point that they stopped seeing their humanity. There are so many judges who've done funny things. We've heard the stories, the rumors, whatever the case may be. They are still serving, a lot of them. A lot of them are still serving. So for Dr. John Hlophe to be the first one to be removed, I think was a symptom of what is known as tall poppy syndrome. When there's a tall poppy growing there, some people want to cut down the tall poppy. There are some people who don't want to see a brilliant person who is African, who has a degree from Oxford, who is able to be the judge president in the Western Cape, which is a predominantly European, area. They don't want to see that. An African in that space, in that position, in that capacity, has always been an enemy. And I think there was an appetite in many circles to remove him, to cut down the tall poppy. That's what I think. You may disagree, you may agree. Let's have a conversation, right? Also, having said that, I do think that the finding was too harsh. I do. I respect it. I agree with the fact that the JSC has those powers, that the vote was made, but I do think it was political. I really do think it was political. Right. Now, my other thought is that even if you disagree with me that the finding was not too harsh, it was appropriate. We've already discussed that he has the legal powers to be there. The other issue then becomes, does it really hurt the JSC? There are 23 members. He's one man. He's not even chairing those sittings of the JSC. So I think that we would be exaggerating the harm that could be caused by one man asking questions to other judges, which they're still going to be able to answer. And if he asks inappropriate questions, those questions will be overruled by the chairperson. So I think that we shouldn't over-exaggerate the influence one person can have on 22 other people. Even the fact that Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was not nominated by the JSC, people blame Julius Malema, people blame Dalimpofu as if they were the only people there. He did not impress 23 people sufficiently. There were other choices that they found to be preferable. And we have to respect that. Just because you liked him or he was, it doesn't mean that he was the preference of the JSC. And the fact that people were trying to make it seem as if, they were trying to make it seem as if Julius Malema really has juju. Because it's called juju doesn't mean he's got juju. It's just a nickname. They were now making it seem as if Julius bewitched everyone in there. Ronald Lamula, so many people who were in there. ANC members as well. 3 who are coming from the ruling party. You've got the Minister of Justice. You've got several other. They were making it seem as if Juju went somewhere to Deep Vendor and got a something, just to. And then all of a sudden, everybody didn't like Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Come on, guys. What are we doing here? That's illogical. So he's one person, right? I don't think that he's going to be able to adversely impact anything if he comes there with an ulterior motive, right? Number 4, in terms of my thoughts, I still think that he has a massive contribution that he can make. And I think we have to give him benefit of the doubt to a degree. We have to give him a chance to show whether he has remorse, whether he, for his misconduct, which I think there was some, right? In terms of like him going to lobby for Zuma. But I don't think it was gross misconduct. In any event, I think that his contribution is still going to be vast. This guy has got a PhD from Cambridge. This guy has served for 24 years as a judge president. This guy has developed areas of law in South Africa, contributed to scholarship, contributed to precedent, contributed to the legal community in a massive way. I think because of his education, his experience, his mind, he will be able to ask relevant questions to the judges, to the candidates who are appearing before the JSC, and those questions will still be valuable. Finally, I want to say, the ethical concerns are valid, but people must not act holier than thou. There are many people who have done funny business, who in one way or another are still part of the process of selecting judges. There's a man who was found to have hundreds of thousands of US dollars, some people say millions of US dollars, on his farm. When the money was stolen, he didn't report it to the police station. He told his security guards to go and get it in Namibia. They went to Namibia without permission, and they tried to recover that money. When that story was revealed, it was then taken to a Section 89 independent panel, which found that the man had a prima facie thing to answer. They said that his version was not credible. They said that the money which came in was not declared. They said that there was funny business. The explanation did not add up. That's what they said. Who said this? A former Chief Justice, Sandilengo, and 2 other legal professionals. They said Parliament must look into this matter. The matter was blocked because they said, no, it's going to be taken to court. This was the ruling party at the time and its MPs. Then the matter was withdrawn from the courts the next year. It was withdrawn. So it has not been legally adjudicated thus far. That man also is part of the selection of judges. And these people who are talking about ethics act as if the public doesn't know or can't see. As if it's just angels in that JSC. Is it just angels? Is it just angels there? Gabriel, Michael, all of these angels that are mentioned in the holy books. Or are there people who really have questions to answer? So what I'm trying to put across is moral indignation is justified, but must be consistent. Otherwise, the people who are raising the moral indignation also can get examined. You know the reason why the man said, before you throw a stone, check yourself. Right? He said, hey, you want to remove a stick? A stick in my eye, you got a log in your eye. Why are you trying to skip a process? What he was trying to say is, listen, be careful around these kind of moral concerns if you yourself also can be painted with the same brush. Deal with your own issues. What I'm saying is, as we have these conversations about ethics, if we were having them in an environment where people hadn't been found with money in their houses and all of that, if state capture commissions hadn't been used in ways that were funny, if other people sitting on those same JSCs hadn't been accused of harassment in those particular offices, those harassment things, even though they were never fully ventilated, they didn't fall out of nowhere, right? Whispers come out of somewhere. Sometimes we say we want to believe victims, we want to believe them, and we want to understand that it's difficult to complain about people in positions of high power because of a fear of retaliation, especially if those people are politically connected. Are we really going to sit and pretend like Dr. John Hlophe is such an evil man and the only evil man to a point where he must not sit on this thing as if he's not a human being, as if there are not other human beings who may have questions? I think we need to get to a point where we get past where we are. The judiciary is an important institution and must be above reproach. And it's unfortunate that over the years, the politics of the nation have seeped into the judiciary. They have. I don't think it's a good thing overall. But at the same time, I don't think it's a good thing to pretend as if only some people have questions to answer and others do not. Others are perfect. I think those are kind of naughty media narratives that don't serve everyone who's trying to approach this conversation objectively. Let's see what happens, but those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Let's have a conversation. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It's free, that thing, to subscribe. Just click on, and then you subscribe. Press that notification button. Lets you know when new content comes out. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.